So what if you had everything you could possibly want? I mean, wealth, status, a future where you'd never have to worry about a thing. But you felt this deep, nagging feeling that you were meant to give it all away. Well, today we're jumping into the incredible story of Claire of Assisi. She was a young noblewoman who faced that exact choice, trading a life of total luxury for a life of, well, radical purpose.
And that right there, that's the whole heart of her story. I mean, think about it. For a woman born into the absolute top tier of 13th century Italian society, what on earth could be more unique than the life she already had? What kind of new life could possibly be so powerful that she'd be willing to risk everything for it? All right, let's get into it. To really get Claire's choice, you first have to understand the world she came from. It was a world of unbelievable privilege, for sure, but it was also a world of super rigid, unbending rules. You could call it a beautiful gilded cage, but it was still a cage. And the luxury here is just staggering. We're talking huge palaces, clothes made of silk and satin, literally trimmed with gold and silver. Life was just one big loop of fancy banquets, festivals, and parties. And for the noblewomen, manual labor was completely forbidden. Their hands were meant for playing instruments or doing fine embroidery, not actual work. It was a life of prescribed comfort that honestly sounds almost suffocating. You see, society back then had these two totally different paths laid out. For the guys, life was all about power, tournaments, war, politics, business. But for the women, their lives were completely defined by the home, by social events, and this is the big one, by arranged marriages. Marriages that were all about strategy, about increasing the family's power and wealth. A woman's own dreams or desires? Yeah, they weren't really part of the conversation. But for Claire, this seemingly perfect world had some serious cracks in it. Even from a really young age, she felt this huge disconnect between the life she was living inside her palace walls and the reality of the world right outside. And you see the first little hints of this in her secret acts of kindness. While her family was feasting on these extravagant meals, Claire would quietly set aside food from her own plate to give to the poor. It was kind of a small rebellion, right? A quiet act of compassion that showed her heart was already looking for something more, something beyond that gilded cage. And then comes this moment that changes everything. Just picture her, watching from a window as this huge parade goes by. The nobles are just this river of color and wealth. Velvet caps, flowing gowns, the whole shebang. But trailing behind them, almost like shadows, are the poor, the sick, the outcasts of society. And for Claire, seeing that contrast side by side, well, it was impossible to ignore. And boom, in that moment, this one idea just clicks and makes sense of everything she was feeling. The whole social order she'd been taught her entire life, where the rich and powerful were first, it suddenly seemed completely upside down. She started seeing the world not through the eyes of a noblewoman, but through this radical new lens. Okay, but that brings up a massive question. I mean, it's one thing to feel this way, but what could she possibly do about it? In her world, a daughter's destiny was marriage. End of story. So how could she ever escape? Well, the answer was about to come from a very, very unexpected and pretty controversial source. And that unexpected source was a man you've probably heard of, Francis of Assisi. Now, today we think of him as this beloved saint, but back then, especially to the nobility, he was seen as a dangerous radical. And this is exactly why he was so fascinating to Claire. See, Francis wasn't born poor. He was the son of a rich cloth merchant who had, on his own, decided to renounce everything, his inheritance, his fancy clothes, his status, to live a life of total poverty and service. He had already made the very choice she was only beginning to dream of. Her family's reaction tells you everything you need to know. Her uncle called them fanatics. He was just furious that they would give away their own stuff to live like beggars. And the worst part in his eyes, they hung out with lepers, the absolute lowest of the low. To her family, Francis and his followers were a threat to the entire social order. But Claire, she saw something completely different. She wasn't disgusted, she was captivated. Where her family saw madness, she saw something real, something authentic. She listened to his sermons and felt this fire in imagination that was totally missing from her own structured life. He was living a life that actually meant something. So what happens next is pretty much straight out of a movie. Claire knew she had to talk to Francis, but a secret meeting between a high-born noblewoman and this notorious religious radical, that would have been a huge scandal. So they arrange to meet in secret.
And in their meeting, Francis doesn't just give her a straight answer. Instead, he asks her this kind of cryptic question. He references a story from the Bible about a woman who anoints Jesus' feet with this incredibly expensive perfume, and all the people watching immediately call it a waste. And Claire gets the connection instantly. That woman poured out her most valuable possession, all as an act of pure love. To all the practical, logical people around her, it made zero sense. It was foolish, a waste. You know, it's a timeless feeling, isn't it? That fear that if you follow your deepest passion, whether it's art or service or starting something new, that the rest of the world will just see it as a foolish waste of time. Then, Francis delivers the line that changes everything. He looks right at her and says, "Claire, you are precious oil. Waste yourself on Jesus. He is worth it." He wasn't telling her to save her life or be practical. He was telling her to pour it all out, completely, for what she believed in. He totally flipped the idea of waste on its head and turned it into the ultimate act of purpose.
And just like that, her decision was made. She would choose a life that the world would absolutely call a total waste, but that she now knew deep down was her true calling. And this wasn't some vague feeling either. This was a real path with concrete, seriously radical steps. She would have to publicly renounce her noble status, embrace absolute poverty, like owning nothing at all, and become a minor, one of the little ones of society. She'd have to trust completely in God to provide for her day by day. You just can't overstate how courageous this was. Her family would be horrified. Her friends would be completely confused. Society would condemn her. From every single outside perspective, her choice was illogical, it was insane, and it was a complete and utter waste of the privileged life she'd been handed.
But here's the thing. Here's how she saw it. She felt like she'd been a merchant her whole life, always searching for valuable pearls. And she had finally found the one, the single, perfect pearl of great price. And for that one pearl, she was more than happy. She was joyful to sell off everything else she owned. What looked like a devastating loss to the world felt like the ultimate win to her. And that kind of leaves us with a question, doesn't it? I mean, Claire's story is 800 years old, but her struggle feels incredibly modern. It really forces us to look at our own lives and ask, what's our pearl of great price? What do we value so much that everything else just seems secondary? What would you be willing to waste to find your true purpose?